Today on Between the Lines, a woman who came into our lives because she is the daughter of a famous family, the daughter of Ronald and Nancy Reagan, Patti Davis. I'm Barry Kibrick, now the author of 7 books. Patti has carved out a name for herself, but as she says, she is always and forever a daughter. With her book, The Lives Our Mothers Leave Us, Patti shares her story along with those of many other notable women to give us an insightful, complex, and ultimately loving look at the mother-daughter relationship.
I'm a writer today because I was a reader when I was 11 years old, and it was...
You do not need to prove your state of happiness to anybody.
Most of these speeches were as much as a month in preparation.
Characters, the heroes in this book, are seekers of truth in a story that involves a lot of
You
corruption.
don't get a chance to really talk about what's real. And this is the first thing to do.
Patti, welcome to the show. It's a pleasure to have you here.
It's very much a pleasure to be here. Thank you.
You know, it's funny, I looked at the back of the book and I said, you know, 4 of these women I've had on my show. I've had Anne Rice, I've had Kathy Smith, I had Marianne Williamson, Carolyn C. So this is kind of nice that you're sharing their stories, but it's your insight to that role of the mother-daughter. And I want to tell my viewers something. I had a relationship with my mom that some of these stories are also very relatable to, even though it's really geared towards the mother-daughter.
Right.
I found certain things in it that were universal to both of our genders.
I think that, you know, one of the things that was really brought home to me in doing this book was that we are much more alike than we are different, all of us. I could find something to relate to in every single one of these stories, every woman's story, even experiences and situations that are completely removed from anything that I was sort of viscerally familiar with. I still, on an emotional level, found a familiarity with every single one of these women.
You know, you say, in fact, at sometimes around the age 40, that's when most of us, and that's even when I first realized that our mothers live deep inside us and always will. And this is the line that I enjoyed, was sometimes etched as delicately as a watermark, sometimes as deep as an engraving. And you know, you get that sense. In fact, I thought sometimes both. Certain aspects, they're sitting there like the watermark. Certain aspects, they're just chiseled inside you.
Yeah. And one of my sort of rules of asking women to participate in this is I did want everybody to be at least 40, because I do think that there is something about the age of 40 that gives you a remove, and it's almost like going to an art museum and standing back from a painting and being able to see it more clearly and more completely with that remove and with that distance. And there is something biological, I think, about 40, I think particularly for women, where you do have that remove and you look at the whole palette, you look at the whole picture, and I think that's when you sort of start to get that, you know, our mothers had lives before they became our mothers.
Well, you know, it's funny, when I told people I was having you on a book about mother and daughter relationships, one of the first things they said was, well, I thought she didn't really like her mom. And I said, well, you know, that's not really the case. What the case was, there was things that they had to deal with. And one of the things you say in the book is that it's oftentimes through anger that we even make more of the realization how tethered, your words are, that we're tethered with our moms.
Right. I think, again, it's that remove. The only other rule, actually, that I had for talking to women is I wanted every woman to have had a relationship with their mother, a speaking relationship with their mother if their mothers are gone, or currently have one if their mothers are still with us. The not speaking thing was not going to work for me. I've done that too. And I wanted the closing of the circle. Do you know? I wanted, whatever the problems were, whatever the issues were, I wanted to see how these women closed the circle. And you can't close a circle if you just go, okay, bye, leaving.
Well, you know, you did something very important here too, was to help women who had bad relationships with their mom and to alleviate even some guilt that's associated with that. You say It doesn't matter what point you are in the relationship. You can make that change now. The biggest thing is to never try to play catch up. And I thought that was very important for people to hear, because oftentimes people think that if they don't dredge up everything or go all the way back into their life and into their past, that they can't remedy these things. And I say, no. You can just start now. In fact, don't try to catch up.
Right. I think that's death in parent-child relationships. Personally, there are people who would disagree with that, but I think it's pointless, and I think it's a good thing to do in therapy for yourself. But I think that I think the reason for it is to understand what decisions you made about your own life. You know, to look at the experiences and look at what happened in order to see what you took from that and how you're carrying that on. But in terms of the relationship itself, I think, you pick a point and you start there. I think also it's really important to accept that if there wasn't a foundation early on, and I certainly didn't have one with my mother, and a number of the women in this book did not, you're never going to have the relationship that other women who did have that foundation have with their mothers. I mean, that's a fantasy that you might get to a better place, but you are in a sense building a house on sand, right? And I think if I were to distill this book down to one word of what it's about, it's acceptance.
Well, you know, we talked, as I said, the women that are in the book. Carolyn C., one of them, been on my show twice, just one of the great writers in my opinion. And you use a line, and because she was the one that also had a lot of trouble.
Oh, her mother was horrible.
Oh, I mean, wait, I'm going to, hold on, this is,
and she still spoke to her. You wouldn't have blamed her for leaving.
Haunted is what she says. Yeah. But you know, you say something that is important for every one of us, and not only in regards to family, but I think it holds true to so much in life, and that is, you know, we don't get a chance to make all these choices. And in that particular chapter, you said, we don't get to choose our family, or in this case, our mothers, but we do get to choose how we react to them and with them. That is so important in all the things in life that we don't get to choose. Yeah. How are we going to still react? That's what we're measured on.
Exactly, and I think part of the reason this stuff is so profound and lives so deeply within us is that, first of all, it just pushes all our buttons. But if you can figure out what you're supposed to learn and do that learning process with your parent, in this case with your mother, I think you're set up pretty well for life. I don't think anybody else is going to sideline you in the way they might have if you're unresolved in that that area.
You know, though, and you see this through a number of the people you spoke to. I think it might have been in Melissa Gilbert's chapter, but you talked about, because of sometimes these relationships, we build up armor. And they build up armor, the moms build up armor, the daughters build up armor, but you can't, as you said, you can't expect them to drop their armor until you put down your shield and let them, you know, come in and you go inward. So
even if you do put down your shield, I think you can't. I think if you're changing and you're growing and you're approaching that relationship in a different way with the agenda, well, then they're going to change. Maybe yes, maybe no. You can't get anyone else to change. Maybe they will, and maybe they won't, and maybe they'll change in some moments and then not in others. It's really for you. You know, it's the burden of learning, I think, is on us, is on the next generation in terms of our parents.
You know, you use this line, one of the ironies of life is that often the deepest wisdom comes from the cruelest blows. And in that mother and daughter relationship, and I've seen this on so many levels, sometimes the deepest wounds do come from your own mother. Those are the blows that literally shape and affect your personality, and you've got to realize that when you react to it still in a proper manner, the wisdom may be the deepest once you, again, as you said before, step back. and look
right.
into it.
And then I think the next step from that is actually finding some gratitude for it, because you did learn. And that's huge. I mean, I think that's a real quantum leap, you know, to say, okay, thank you. These were really hard lessons and painful lessons to learn. I thought, you know, one of the most moving stories in there was Mariel Hemingway's, because she also had a terrible mother and very mean. And I should also say that not every woman's story in this book was about terrible mothers. Some were very, like Lily Tomlin's and people like that, were very loving, wonderful stories. But there were some startlingly terrible experiences.
But that is where the wisdom comes out.
Exactly.
I know that sounds funny. I mean, that's where they grow.
But Mariel had this uncommon wisdom as a young girl. I mean, an 11-year-old girl who was given the terrible responsibility of caring for a woman with cancer and being her nurse and being left alone in the house with her mother and doing nursing work. And she had this wisdom even as a young girl that her mother would be different if she only knew how. And in that one moment was sort of the aperture where she was being able to see inside of her mother and see who her mother could have been if circumstances had been different and if she allowed that to come through. How do you know that at 11 years old?
It is, well, you know what it is, I think? I'll tell you. You said it. You just didn't connect it. That gratefulness, the gratitude. I think once you can grasp that little bit, I've only learned this, I should say this carefully, because when you learn something, you think you could put it into action, but you can't. I figured that out all the time. I know this, but I can't live by
no,
this.
It's kind of a pilgrim's path there.
Yeah, I just, I want to make that very clear. It sounds really good, but it's very difficult to do. But whenever I'm able to say the word like I've been cursed or I've been, and then change that to being blessed. Just change the word. Whenever you think, my mother, I'm blessed by that. I'm not cursed by it. Just change that little bit. And the only way you can do that is to realize the gratefulness that goes along with it. That's the only connection I can make with Mariel, is that maybe even as a young child, she had that much awareness. I don't know how you do that at 11. As I said, I can't do it now and live that way.
She is, I think, an old soul. And I was so impressed by that, that she never had to get over the bitterness, which doesn't mean she wasn't angry sometimes. It doesn't mean that I'm not kind of painting her with pink paint and know everything was just rose. It wasn't at all. But she did have an insight that just blew me away.
Well, you say and maybe again, this is where it came from, you making peace with that history. That is the real key, similar to the way we react, making peace with it. No matter how damaging it was, can you make peace with it? And you're right, in a sense, you don't even need your mother to go along with it. You don't need, even in any kind of a situation or relationship, the other person doesn't even have to be there with you, as long as you're able to do it. I tell people, I've had other authors that shed some of this light on there. It really just takes one person to make the awareness, at least to cover themselves.
Right, because then what happens is, no matter what comes at you, your experience of that experience is different. Right?
Yes, exactly.
So it's not, sometimes it's not even, well, it's great, my mother's not pushing my buttons anymore. Well, but if you really look at it objectively, she's maybe trying really hard to. You're not allowing that to happen.
One of the issues that I think so many men and women can relate to came out of Faye Waddleton's conversation, and that was the living up to the standards.
Yeah.
And I don't know in your situation, but I almost sense, I want to go back to yours in a moment, because there's something interesting I wanted to share with the viewers on that. But even in your situation, I don't know, knowing Nancy, I almost can tell that those standards were probably very tough. But in all of the women, you get a sense that some of the hardship, and in Faye's in particular, it comes out, is that I didn't meet up to her standards. And the saddest part about that is, I feel sometimes so sorry for the moms who didn't realize how wonderful probably their daughters were.
Yes.
And it was their loss. It's their loss. I've seen that in some of the people that I'm the closest with.
Yeah, and I think that also softens you and gives you compassion, because I think for most of us, if we've had problematic relationships, we go through a long time in our lives just talking about the problems and blaming and we have a right to, in a way, but it sort of becomes our calling card. We sort of wear that. I mean, mine was, hi, I'm Patti, I don't get along with my mother, and my father just bombed Libya. And, it's sort of like, I sort of led with that, rather than, let me tell you, so it was leading with like, let me tell you what's wrong. Rather than, again, that distance and that remove in saying, okay, the situation has been what it is and the history is what it is, but, my parents lost out too, in a way. Whether they realized it or not, they lost out too. So Faye Waddleton's mother, who actually is still alive, and she's in her 90s, but she's still alive, she lost out too, because Faye's an amazing, amazing woman. And no, she didn't live her life according to the script that her mother had devised for her. But her mother didn't, I don't think, really still has had an appreciation for what Faye, the impact that Faye has had in the world.
Well, and you fed me beautifully. I want to go right there because, you talked about mom and dad. The one thing that you got a clear picture of about your mom and dad in here was how much they loved each other, to the fact where they almost blinded themselves by that love and therefore didn't have anything for the kids. But and that's where I was talking about how you view things, because on one level, viewing the love of a mother and father having for each other could provide a very positive thing if the parents are engaged differently with the children. You follow? So you have to be able to let down that armor, step back and see, all right, I get it, which is what you're doing.
Yeah, you look at that, in my case, that kind of exclusionary thing, and you go, okay, well, there was a cost on that end too.
This is the other thing too, you do here, which I think is so important, because so many women don't even make this realization until their mothers are already gone. And that guilt, they need to be able to set themselves free somehow.
Yes.
And this is one of the ways, if they can see that and let it be a console rather than of curse again.
Yes, exactly. And again, I think it's that inner work that you do in yourself. And I just found it so fascinating that these women who have accomplished so much in life, way more than I feel I have, who I was very humbled by. I mean, to have Anne Rice agree to talk to me I was so nervous talking to her, but she's achieved so much. And she lost her mother at 14 years old. Her mother was a serious alcoholic and actually died going into shock when they tried to dry her out. And I was so impressed with, once knowing their history and then seeing how they built their lives on top of really shaky beginnings.
You do something too, and I think again, as women, especially the baby boom generation now, they're now caring for their mothers, and you have numerous examples of, even with your own mother, not that you're necessarily caring for her, but just their fragility as they age. I think it's Marg Helgenberg from CSI. She talks about that as well, that reversal of roles. Now
that was so interesting, because hers happened so early. Her mother was, her father got MS, and so he was ill, and they had terrible problems taking care of him financially. And then her mother got breast cancer, and then Marg started working and earning money really at a pretty young age, and as an actress. And so that role reversal happened very early on, like in her 20s. And I hadn't quite, that was one situation I hadn't really thought about before, of how kind of shocking that is. because she's supposed to still be your mother, and she needs to ask you for money. And
but now though, even when as women are in their 40s and 50s and they're taking care of their moms who are now in their 70s, 80s, and as you said, like Faye Waddleton's mom in their 90s, you know, that reversal, when you now have to start giving the care, and especially, what do you do when that mother didn't even care for you correctly? Now that's got to be an interesting burden that if you can overcome it, I don't even know what the right words are at this point, but you must gain something so much by that.
Well, I think where you have to go to in yourself and what you have to find in yourself is compassion.
In your own self.
In yourself. You know? And that's, I mean, because that is your freedom, really, from, I mean, I think therapy is important, and understanding all of this stuff is important intellectually and consequently emotionally. But ultimately, the choice is, am I going to be compassionate, or am I going to hold to, well, they did this and they did that?
You know, I joke with my wife, we have a running gag. She always tells me she loves to laugh. And I go, well, come on, honey, who doesn't love to laugh? But you know, in a few cases, in Carolyn C's case with humor, Lorna Luft, I believe, and it was Lily Tomlin, who, by the way, you said even had a wonderful relationship. I think. The ability, though, to laugh at this, especially as you can get a little distance, really makes all the difference in the world.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Well, Lily's story was just, I mean, it was just such a delight, you know, and her story about her brother sawing the couch in 3 pieces because he wanted a sectional.
Yes.
You know?
What an eclectic family that must have been, though. Think of Lily Tomlin herself, and then you think of her brother. He was a real artistic character, though. I mean, everything. He'd knock down walls. He would do anything. And the mom didn't seem to be bothered by it.
But you got the impression, I got the impression anyway, that she had really got such enjoyment out of her kids, because the story about him sawing the couch in 3 pieces, he wanted a sectional. He wanted it to look like a, you know, penthouse suite, their Detroit apartment. And I said, well, what did your mother say about that? And she said, well, she was shocked, but the thing was he did it so well.
That's what I was amazed at. It almost sounded like it looked pretty good.
Yeah, he put fabric over the ends with it, you know. I mean, you just got the feeling that she came from this family that had a lot of fun, and that her mother had a lot of fun with her children, and that's invaluable, I think.
You know, I want to read this, because we've been telling people about, you know, stepping back and looking at it. And sometimes I'm always afraid that when we have these conversations, people think how easy that is. And I want to read this because I think it's important. It's hard work, these are your words, to step back and look at both your childhood and your parents' lives. And then this is the line: it often feels like a cross between therapy and archaeology. and you know, you can just see that, and it really is. It's one thing for us to converse about it. It is not easy. I want people to know it's a difficult task. It's one you should undertake, but it's not easy.
And I don't think it really ever ends. I think you get better at it as you go along, because you have the tools and because you desire to work at it. But I don't think it ever gets easier. Well, I don't think it ever gets to be, you know, just sort of second nature and, oh, I'm over that. I misspoke. It does get easier, but it doesn't become this just sort of facile thing of like, oh, well, I used to get upset about that, and I don't get upset about that anymore. You know?
Right, yeah.
Sure you do.
Right. In fact, what I tell people all the time, you not only do you keep, I just got to keep learning the same lessons over and over again. Yeah. You know, always. Isn't that the case?
Yeah, but the time frame is a little quicker. I think that's what happens.
That's my line to my son.
Yeah.
He says, well, when will this ever stop? I go, never.
Never.
It's just that the periods get a little bit shorter and shorter. So where you feel lousy this much and then good only this much, you hope to just balance it out in that other area. Yeah, because
it really is about growing up. It's like, you know, okay, I feel like a 9-year-old here. I don't like this feeling, so I'm going to choose differently. It's always about choosing differently and choosing to see things differently.
Well, I would choose to sit and chat with you forever, but our time is up. I want to end with your words. It's a delicate dance, this mother-daughter waltz, one that defines so much of our lives and charts who we are. Thank you, Patti, for sharing those wonderful charts with us today. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
My pleasure, and thank you guys for joining us. Now, before Patti leaves, I'd like to leave you with these few words from the lives our mothers leave us. Sometimes life drags you beneath the surface into dark waters, and all you can do is float. Look around, search within, and try to understand how you got there until light breaks through and you can start swimming again. I'm Barry Kibrick. When life drags you into those dark waters, look beneath, above, and between the surface, and you will soon, trust me, be able to swim again. Thank you, Patti.
Thank you so much.
My pleasure.
If you'd like to get in touch with us, want a DVD or transcript of our show, catch an episode online, or receive our weekly updates, go to www.klcs.org/BTL. Closed captioning for Between the Lines with Barry Kibrick is made possible by Loyola Marymount University in Los Angeles, ranked 4th best regional university in the West by U.S. News and World Report, and dedicated to the encouragement of learning.